All right, let's talk about some other natural strategies to prevent dementia and Alzheimer's. So these are again, this is not an exhaustive list, but I want to give you some walkaways tonight, things that you should absolutely walk away from tonight with action steps to be able to enhance your cognitive skill set in your brain, right? So number one is limiting alcohol. And I would go so far as to say eliminate alcohol if you want your brain to function. Alcohol, one of the side effects of prolonged drinking is something called Wernicke-Korsakoff, which is a neurological B vitamin deficiency induced by alcohol, and it can cause severe psychosis and brain damage. And so the more you drink on a consistent, regular basis, the more you're going to deplete your B vitamins. Now, we talked a little bit tonight about those B vitamins, didn't we? Alcohol depletes them. And alcohol also makes, alcohol as a chemical is a poison. And the byproduct of alcohol metabolism is something called acetaldehyde, which is also poison. Both can impact and affect you, creating inflammation. So limit, at the very least, eliminate. Many of you don't drink, and that's probably a good thing because there's a lot of research that shows that alcohol contributes to dementia. Okay, another elimination would be avoid smoking, right? And this has to do with the one, smoking has toxic metals in it. So if you smoke a cigarette, you're getting exposure to toxic metals like cadmium, which are neurodegenerative chemicals, right? So the more of the exposure that you get, the more you run the risk of developing a problem. Cigarette smoking also very, very potent free radical. And remember, one of the risks of developing dementia is excessive free radicals without enough antioxidants to offset them. And so when you have behaviors that generate free radicals, but you don't have a good diet to offset that, you really increase your risk. So these two things are more of avoids. Let's talk about some things that you can do, though. Let me change my color here. Okay, fasting. This is a big one. One of the reasons why fasting is so effective is because it helps with your blood sugar, right? Remember, what did we say earlier about blood sugar? Too much blood sugar creates a glycation effect, and that glycation effect alters the proteins in your neurons and creates plaque formation. So fasting regularly, I like the intermittent fasting as a daily tool. I fast every day at least 16 hours. So from generally an earlier dinner to a later kind of brunch / lunch, you can stretch a good 16-hour window in there and make sure your blood sugar is not building up in high quantities. Adequate sleep. Your brain dumps its chemical toxins at night when you sleep. So if you're missing sleep, if you're not getting sleep, you don't get that brain detox that your body needs. So when should we sleep? Especially is a good time to talk about that because we're moving into that daylight savings, right? You should sleep ideally. Now, if you could, in a perfect world, we'd go to bed when the sun went down from the horizon, and we'd wake up when the sun came up over the horizon. So you go down with the sun and you wake up with the sun. Ideal world. It's harder to do that in winter, especially if you live in an area where they practice the spring forward, fall back components of daylight savings, because in the winter months, most of you are getting off of work at 6. So it's dark already when you get off of work, and so it almost makes it impossible to be asleep as you're driving home from work. So, but as close to that window as possible, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. is the minimum time frame researchers show as far as being a very critical time to reset your hormones and to help your brain flush its chemical toxins. Ensure adequate nutrition. What does that really mean, ensure adequate nutrition? It means eat well. And everybody's diet, one man's food is another man's poison. So not everybody can just eat the same diet. This is why when you hear generic things like everybody should follow the Mediterranean diet, or everybody should be vegetarian, or everybody should be carnivore or keto, etc., no one diet is right for every person. So understanding yourself, ensuring adequate nutrition for you as a unique individual is more important than following generic advice. And so that even includes the generic advice that I give you. I encourage everyone here, if you don't know that you're gluten sensitive, you should be tested to see if you have a gluten sensitivity. If you struggle with autoimmune disease, if you struggle with cognitive function, if you're one of these individuals and you think you're developing that early onset level of symptoms around it, get tested for food sensitivity, food allergies, because then you can alter your diet to what your needs are, and that's more accurate than just generically following a diet. Keep your brain as active as possible. I see this a lot in people that retire. They retire from a very active career where their brains are having to work, where they're having to problem solve and do things, and then they retire to basically sit around all day and not use their brain. Look, God gave you the gift of a mind. Don't quit using it ever, no matter what anyone ever tells you. You have to keep going. You can slow down to the extent that you don't want to go punch a clock to a 9 to 5, but never let your brain rest. You should always be asking, how can I improve my cognition? How can I challenge myself today? The challenge never ends until you do. And so stay active, and that includes your body and your brain. And that's what we see over here, sufficient activity and exercise. That exercise helps pump that lymphatic fluid, which helps to detox the brain. These two go hand in hand, critical and important. Follow a gluten-free diet, and even if you're not gluten sensitive, we could write in a different word here, grain-free, and there are several reasons why I recommend this. And I know I just told you don't follow generic diets, but let me justify what I mean here. If you eat grains, if you've read my book, No Grain, No Pain, you probably already know some of these things, but if you eat grains, a lot of people get exposure in our grains to mycotoxins. Mycotoxins damage nerves. Whether you're gluten sensitive or not, you get these. You get these also in alcohol. So mycotoxins are in grain. You get these heavy in alcohol. You get these heavy in certain brands of coffee. If you're drinking like the standard run-of-the-mill coffee from the gas station, or you're drinking the coffee, just the standard from the grocery store, I can promise you it's loaded with mycotoxins. And so these things damage nerve tissue. Mycotoxins do. They can accelerate your road to dementia very, very quickly. So one reason why avoidance of grain would be to avoid the overconsumption of mycotoxins. Another reason why I say eating grain-free is important is the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Grain is virtually all omega-6, no omega-3. And what this does is this drives up inflammation. So if your diet is heavy in grain, you drive up this ratio and you increase the quantity of inflammation. Anytime you have chronic inflammation, you've got chronic damage that's occurring to that tissue. We also know that many of the grains we've seen, especially processed grains, contain mercury. Rice, we've seen the heavy levels of lead and cadmium and arsenic. These are heavy metals that can contribute to degenerative change in your brain. So we've got heavy metals, you've got high levels of omega-6, you've got high levels of mycotoxins, you've got excessive carbohydrates. We need to make more room, they're so toxic. Excessive carbs, and carbs, again, that process of glycation. And what did I say earlier about dementia being type 3 diabetes? So you're over-consuming carbs. So there's just a lot of properties to over-consuming grain and gluten in the diet, beyond even the gluten, that are potentially negative consequences for you. So again, these are my action steps for you, my challenge to you, to preserve the integrity of your cognitive function, because you have your brain, you have your mind. It's the one thing that you have in this world that is uniquely you. So don't destroy it, and make sure that you preserve its integrity and protect it by taking simple action steps every day to keep it healthy. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.